The silence in the courtroom shattered as Judge Grayson sneered at the black man in simple clothes. Another thug claiming self-defense? Little did he know, this thug had commanded elite SEAL teams and graduated law school with honors. The Los Angeles County Courthouse buzzed with tension as Marcus Johnson stood at the defendant's table. At 32, his powerful frame seemed contained, like a weapon holstered. His posture remained military straight, shoulders squared, chin level, eyes forward, habits from a decade of naval service that civilian life couldn't erase. Judge Walter Grayson peered down, fingers drumming impatiently against polished wood. His mouth twisted into a dismissive smirk as he scanned the case file. Assaulting a police officer? Resisting arrest? He sighed theatrically. Let's make this quick. I have a charity lunch at 1. A ripple of laughter spread through courtroom. The bailiff smirked. The stenographer suppressed a smile. The prosecutor adjusted his tie, confident, but Marcus didn't flinch. His eyes, calm yet intensely aware, scanned the room systematically, assessing entry points, threats, and opportunities. It was the same tactical awareness that had kept him alive through 3 combat tours. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of a man who had commanded in situations where decisions meant life or death. Your Honor, I'd like to represent myself. Mitchell Carrington, the prosecutor, rose with practiced confidence. His $2,000 suit and Harvard law degree were weapons he wielded daily against defendants like Marcus. Your Honor, the facts are straightforward, Carrington began. On the night of March 15th, officers responded to a disturbance at the Blue Line Bar. The defendant, Marcus Johnson, was confrontational and combative when officers attempted to de-escalate the situation. He subsequently struck Officer Peter Reynolds, causing a facial contusion. Carrington paced deliberately. Mr. Johnson then fled the scene, resisted arrest when apprehended, and has shown no remorse for assaulting an officer of the law. Judge Grayson nodded along, barely containing his boredom. Marcus caught the judge's whispered comment to his clerk. Standard case. Standard suspect. The words landed like a familiar weight on Marcus's shoulders. He'd felt this before, in upscale stores where security followed him, at traffic stops that became ordeals, and now, in this courtroom where his guilt was assumed before evidence was presented. His right hand instinctively touched his left forearm where, beneath his shirt sleeve, a Navy SEAL trident tattoo marked his former life. In Afghanistan, he'd led classified operations and made split-second legal judgments under fire. At Georgetown Law, he graduated 3rd in his class. Now, standing in this courtroom, he was just another black defendant to be processed and forgotten. The public defender beside him, young, overworked, with a caseload of 70 clients, leaned over. Take the plea. Probation and community service. Best offer you'll get. Marcus shook his head. He hadn't survived Fallujah to surrender here. I'll be representing myself, Your Honor, Marcus repeated, his voice controlled and precise. The courtroom froze. Judge Grayson's eyebrows shot up as he exchanged glances with the prosecutor. Their shared look communicated volumes. Another defendant who'd watched too many legal dramas. Mr. Johnson, Grayson said, not bothering to hide his amusement. I strongly advise against that. There's an old saying that a man who represents himself has a fool for a client. Scattered laughter rippled through the gallery. Marcus waited for it to subside, his expression unchanged. I'm familiar with the adage, Your Honor. It was Justice Scalia who added that a lawyer who represents himself has a fool for a lawyer. His voice remained respectful but firm. Nevertheless, I'll waive my right to counsel. Grayson's smile faltered slightly. Legal quotations weren't what he expected from the man before him. Very well. The judge sighed, settling back. Your funeral, Mr. Johnson. Prosecution, proceed. Carrington approached confidently, but Marcus noticed a slight adjustment in his stance. The recalibration that occurs when an opponent doesn't behave as expected. Officer Reynolds will testify that the defendant was belligerent, threatening bar patrons, and immediately aggressive when police arrived, Carrington announced. Marcus didn't interrupt, instead making precise notes in a small, leather-bound notebook. The courtroom watched, curious at his calm demeanor. When Carrington finished, Judge Grayson turned to Marcus with theatrical patience. "Your defense, Mr. Johnson?" Marcus stood, buttoning his jacket, a subconscious military habit before addressing superiors. "Your Honor, before Officer Reynolds testifies, I'd like to request the bar security footage from that night be entered into evidence." Carrington's head snapped up. "Your Honor, we have officer testimony. Video is unnecessary and wasn't included in discovery." "Precisely my concern," Marcus replied. "Your Honor," Marcus continued, "my request for security footage isn't superfluous. It's essential to establishing the sequence of events." Judge Grayson frowned. "Mr. Carrington, was this footage collected during investigation?" The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, Your Honor, but it was deemed non-essential to our case." "Non-essential or contradictory?" Marcus asked quietly. The question hung in the air, pointed yet delivered without aggression. Marcus maintained perfect composure, his hands clasped behind his back in parade rest, a military stance that had become second nature. "I move that the footage be retrieved immediately," Marcus stated. "And while we wait, I'd like to cross-examine Officer Reynolds." When Officer Reynolds took the stand, young, confident, with 3 years on the force, Marcus approached methodically. His questioning began conventionally, establishing the officer's arrival at the scene. Then, the strategy shifted. "Officer Reynolds, in your report you stated you arrived at 11:17 p.m. and immediately identified me as the aggressor." "Correct." "That's right. And you were wearing your body camera as required by department policy?" Reynolds hesitated. "Yes." "Strange," Marcus said, consulting his notebook. "Because according to dispatch records I subpoenaed, you weren't dispatched until 11:23 p.m., arriving at approximately 11:30 p.m. That's a 13-minute discrepancy." Reynolds glanced at Carrington, who straightened in his chair. "Additionally," Marcus continued, "your report states I was wearing a red shirt, yet the booking photo shows me in blue. Can you explain these inconsistencies?" The courtroom tensed as Reynolds struggled for answers. Marcus's questioning wasn't just knowledgeable, it was strategic, establishing patterns of unreliability. Judge Grayson leaned forward, his boredom replaced by reluctant interest. The gallery whispered. This wasn't the fumbling self-representation they'd expected. "In my experience," Marcus added, "timeline discrepancies often indicate retroactive report modification." "Objection!" Carrington stood. "What experience is the defendant claiming?" Marcus looked directly at the judge. "Evidence collection and timeline verification were crucial components of my military duties, Your Honor. Discrepancies cost lives." It was the first direct reference to his service. Carefully placed, the word military rippled through the courtroom like a stone dropped in still water. The courtroom atmosphere shifted as Marcus's military reference hung in the air. Judge Grayson studied him with renewed attention, noticing details he'd overlooked: the disciplined posture, the strategic thinking, the methodical approach to questioning. "Military experience notwithstanding," Carrington interjected, "the defendant lacks legal training to properly interpret police procedure." Marcus let the statement settle before responding. "Your Honor, during my final 3 years with Naval Special Warfare, I serve as a SEAL Team's legal liaison officer. My responsibilities included ensuring operational compliance with rules of engagement and international law. I've received extensive training in evidence collection and testimonial consistency." A murmur swept through the gallery. Judge Grayson's expression flickered between surprise and skepticism. "The prosecution's witness has provided contradictory statements," Marcus continued. "Now, regarding the security footage." "Your Honor," Carrington interrupted, suddenly defensive. "The defendant's military claim is irrelevant and possibly fabricated. Many defendants invent military service to gain sympathy." Marcus remained perfectly still, only his jaw tightening slightly, the only outward sign of the insult's impact. "Stolen valor is a serious accusation, Counselor," Judge Grayson warned, unexpectedly defensive of military service. "I can verify my service record, Your Honor," Marcus replied calmly. "But more importantly, the security footage will verify what actually happened that night. The courtroom doors opened as a clerk entered with a flash drive. Judge Grayson ordered recess to review the footage in chambers. When court reconvened 30 minutes later, the judge's demeanor had noticeably changed. He sat straighter, his earlier condescension replaced by professional formality. After reviewing the security footage, Grayson announced, "It's clear that several elements of Officer Reynolds' testimony are inconsistent with visual evidence." The footage showed Marcus actually de-escalating a situation between an intoxicated patron and the bartender when police arrived. It showed officers immediately confrontational, with Reynolds pushing Marcus without provocation. "Your Honor," Marcus said quietly, "I'd like to introduce one final piece of evidence that will resolve this case." Marcus produced a sealed envelope from his case file. This contained sworn statements from 3 witnesses at the Blue Line bar that night, including the bartender, confirming I was attempting to prevent violence, not instigate it. They were never interviewed by investigating officers. Judge Grayson accepted the envelope, reviewing its contents with increasing gravity. "Additionally," Marcus continued, "I've obtained Officer Reynolds' service record through a Freedom of Information request. This is his 3rd excessive force complaint this year. The previous 2 involved black veterans." The gallery erupted in whispers. Marcus stood unwavering, his military bearing more evident than ever. "Mr. Johnson," Judge Grayson said slowly, "your preparation is unexpected. You've clearly had legal training beyond military experience." "Yes, Your Honor." Marcus finally allowed himself a slight smile. "I graduated from Georgetown Law 3 years ago. I specialize in criminal defense with focus on veterans' issues." The revelation stunned the courtroom. Carrington paled visibly. After 10 years as a Navy SEAL, including 3 combat tours and receiving the Purple Heart, I decided to serve in a different capacity. Marcus rolled up his sleeve, revealing the SEAL Trident tattoo alongside a scar running the length of his forearm. "I witnessed too many veterans, especially those of color, facing a justice system that presumed their guilt." Judge Grayson removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Why didn't you identify yourself as an attorney from the beginning?" "Would it have mattered, Your Honor?" Marcus asked simply. "When I walked into this courtroom, you saw what you expected to see. You called me another thug to your clerk. You presumed my guilt before hearing evidence." A heavy silence descended. Grayson couldn't deny the accusation. Too many had witnessed his behavior. "What I've demonstrated today isn't exceptional legal brilliance, Your Honor. It's merely adequate representation, something every defendant deserves but many don't receive, especially those who look like me, uniform or not." The judge's face flushed with a complex mixture of shame and recognition. The systematic dismantling of the case against Marcus had simultaneously exposed the prejudices that had fueled it. "Case dismissed," Grayson finally announced, his voice subdued. "Case dismissed," Judge Grayson repeated, striking his gavel with uncharacteristic gentleness. "The court apologizes for the inconvenience, Mr. Johnson." The gallery erupted, journalists scribbling frantically, spectators murmuring in disbelief, law students in the back row exchanging wide-eyed glances. This would be discussed in ethics classes for years. Marcus gathered his materials methodically, his movements precise and economical, the same efficiency with which he'd once packed mission gear. Across the courtroom, Carrington avoided eye contact, hastily shoving papers into his briefcase. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. "Mr. Johnson, did you plan this strategy from the beginning? Will you file a civil rights case against the department? Are you practicing law currently?" Marcus navigated through them with polite determination until he reached the courthouse steps, where 4 men waited, different ages, races, and builds, but sharing the unmistakable bearing of military veterans, his former teammates. "Commander still knows how to clear a room," grinned James Wilson, a former SEAL who'd served under Marcus in Kandahar. "Different battlefield, same principles," Marcus replied, accepting their handshakes and backslaps. From the courthouse entrance, Judge Grayson watched the reunion. When Marcus glanced back, their eyes met briefly. The judge nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement that carried more weight than any apology. Later that evening, the local news led with the story. former Navy SEAL and Georgetown law graduate, exposes flawed arrest and possible police misconduct. Marcus's military photo appeared alongside his booking photo, a jarring contrast that perfectly illustrated the day's events. His phone rang continuously. Law firms offering positions, veterans seeking representation, advocacy groups requesting interviews. But Marcus sat quietly on his apartment balcony, watching the sunset with Wilson and his former teammates, discussing what mattered most: how to use this moment to create lasting change. 3 months after the dismissal, Marcus stood before a different audience. The community center was packed with veterans, many Black and Latino, alongside law students volunteering their time. "The uniform didn't protect me from assumptions," Marcus explained, addressing the room. "I served 10 years, led men into combat, took shrapnel protecting teammates, then came home and earned a law degree. None of that mattered when I was seen as just another Black man in the system." He paced in front of the room, passion evident in every word. "But I had advantages many don't. Legal training, resources, military brothers who had my back. What about the thousands of veterans, especially veterans of color, facing similar situations without those advantages?" The Veterans Justice Initiative had begun modestly in the weeks following his case, but was growing rapidly. Already, they had taken on 15 cases of veterans facing questionable charges, winning 12 dismissals. Today, we're announcing a partnership with Georgetown Law School to provide free representation to veterans in need, Marcus continued. "And we've secured commitment from the District Attorney's Office to implement specialized training for officers interacting with veterans, particularly those with combat experience." In the back of the room, Judge Grayson stood quietly, out of robes and unannounced. He'd come at Marcus's invitation, part of his personal commitment to addressing biases he'd now recognized in himself. Local media covered the event extensively. One headline captured the essence: "From battlefield to courtroom, veteran tackles systemic bias." Marcus concluded the session with words that resonated beyond the immediate audience. Military service shouldn't be a shield from accountability, but neither should be ignored when veterans face a system ill-equipped to understand their experiences. And no American, in uniform or out, should face presumption of guilt based on their appearance. The applause that followed wasn't just for him, but for the mission he'd undertaken, one potentially more impactful than any he'd led in combat. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. How many Marcus Johnsons haven't had the training to defend themselves? How many Black veterans serve with distinction only to return to a country that still judges them by appearance rather than character or contribution? Marcus's story isn't just about one victory in one courtroom. It's about the thousands of cases where prejudice masquerades as judgment, where assumptions replace evidence, and where those who defended our freedoms find those same freedoms compromised. If this story resonated with you, share it. Our justice system improves only when we acknowledge its flaws and work collectively to address them. The same military values that guided Marcus, integrity, courage, commitment, can guide our approach to reforming systems that fall short of their ideals. Subscribe for more stories that challenge perceptions and inspire action. Comment with your experiences or thoughts on how we can better honor veteran service through equal justice. Because true patriotism isn't just about celebrating those who serve. It's ensuring they receive the justice and respect they've earned when they return home.